Welcome to The Critique. The material we're looking at today digs into the national push for internet age verification, arguing it's really a Trojan horse surveillance that threatens both privacy and free speech.
It's a huge topic. Let's jump right in and see how we can make that core argument even stronger. To take this argument from a plausible fear to, an evidenced certainty, the material really needs a clearer, step-by-step causal link between these specific bills and the surveillance outcomes it's predicting.
Right. I mean, the writer does a great job laying out the sheer scope of this potential surveillance state, but the argument hangs so much on that slippery slope idea that age verification today somehow automatically leads to identity chips tomorrow.
And that's compelling, for sure. But it also feels a bit like hyperbole. It risks the core logic because it doesn't really detail how the actual language in a bill like the App Store Accountability Act, the ASA, provides the infrastructure for that to happen.
Exactly. So how do we ground those big claims? The suggestion is to research the exact data standards in the ASA. But then, you risk getting really dry and academic with it.
That's the challenge. But you can present that research by showing how the specific data they're collecting today is like a functional stepping stone for the scary stuff they're warning about.
Okay, so a tactical approach. For instance, you could dig into whether these laws mandate storing government ID data, actual biometric info.
The PII risk, yeah.
Or if it's just an anonymized age check. That one distinction is everything for the Trojan horse argument.
And building on that, if the law is vague on purpose, you could show a pattern. Look at other cases where a really low-level data requirement, like a simple age check, was massively expanded once the system was in place. Show that scope creep.
Or even simpler, just show how it works right now. How do these third-party age verification vendors operate? What access do they already have to our devices? That alone could build the bridge you're talking about, without even needing to speculate.
Okay, so that's the domestic surveillance angle. Now let's talk about that piece of evidence on global control, because that was, wow.
Yes, that example with Cloudflare, outsourcing U.S. content decisions to a German entity, it needs to be a foundational piece of evidence, not an afterthought. Right now, it sort of comes in late in the piece. You have this whole discussion about the U.S. App Store Act, and then later on, there's this bombshell about a German hotline judging American speech.
And putting it there really buries the lead. It minimizes the impact of this very real, very current example of cross-border censorship.
So the suggestion is to completely reframe the structure.
Exactly. You need to connect the dots between the domestic fight over age verification, which the CCIA lawsuit already calls a censorship tool, and the global precedent that companies like Cloudflare are already setting. That German law example shouldn't just be an example. It should be the warning. The end point.
So to make that actionable, you'd introduce the Cloudflare story right after you mention the CCIA lawsuit against Texas, and you frame the risk explicitly. This isn't just about U.S. censorship, it's about global regulatory capture.
Yes, use Cloudflare to define what control really means here. It's control over legal jurisdiction itself. Then you can just ask the reader directly, if this is already happening with hosting providers, how does mandated ID verification at the App Store level accelerate it?
It connects the mechanism, the verification, directly to the outcome, which is foreign censorship on U.S. soil.
Precisely.
And that brings us to the corporate angle. I mean, it was genuinely startling to see giants like Meta, Pinterest, and X actually backing this stuff.
Absolutely. It just stops you in your track. A deeper look at the strategic self-interest there would make the whole analysis so much stronger.
The writer correctly points out how weird it is that these companies aren't fighting back against a bill like the ASA. But the explanation just boils down to they want more data. And that feels, a little too simple.
It overlooks the more politically savvy reasons for why a corporation might actually welcome a burdensome new rule. So is the data grab the full picture? Or is there a more sophisticated tactic at play?
The suggestion here is to explore some of those alternative theories, things like regulatory capture or liability shifting.
Right, things that better explain why these established giants would be okay with new rules.
So for regulatory capture, you could investigate if the ASA imposes huge compliance costs that Meta and X can easily afford, but that would absolutely crush smaller competitors or open source projects.
That's how you lock in your market dominance.
And then there's the other angle, liability shifting. You could explore whether the bill effectively pushes legal liability for things like CSAM.
Which is mentioned in the piece, yeah. Pushes that liability away from platforms like Meta and onto the app stores or the verification services themselves. If that's the case, then endorsing the bill isn't just a data grab. It's a really shrewd legal move to minimize their own corporate risk.
So this critique really zeroes in on 3 specific chances to sharpen this peak. We talked about strengthening that causal link between the bills and the surveillance state.
Making it less of a leap.
Then, structurally moving that powerful Cloudflare example to be a core piece of evidence, not a side note.
And finally, digging deeper into why these big corporations are actually supporting the ASA.
These are all really actionable steps, focused on moving the argument from, a passionate warning to a really grounded, logical analysis.
Exactly. We strongly encourage you to implement these changes and submit your work back to us. We would love to see where it goes.